All right, everybody, welcome to the Clinical Consultation Network on this Tuesday. I don't know about anybody else. Today feels like the end of the week, even though it's still the beginning. But that's okay. So today we have our BrainLinks team back with us on the Clinical Consultation Network. They've been on a few times before and always bring us great presentations. And we've got another good one lined up for you today. So we have Wendy here with us from the BrainLinks team. And Wendy, I will let you introduce yourself, and don't forget to share either another or an update to a previous interesting fact, because I know you've had to do this several times.
Okay. Yeah, happy to be back again. So I am a speech language pathologist, and I'm a certified. I'm a brain injury specialist and certified in brain health coaching. And I don't have a fun fact per se, although you could call it that. It's more of news. My daughter got engaged last week, and so we're so excited. We love him. They've been together for about, I think, 5 or 6 years now. So she's been, yes. Oh, thank you, Kiara. Clapping hands. Thank you. So we're just so excited. Thank you, Spring. Thank you for the congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations and good luck on wedding planning.
Yeah.
That's an undertaking these days.
She's been planning it for years.
Well, that's good.
So she's got everything all laid out. So we'll see what happens. I'm sure this will change everything now that it's officially here.
Yeah. Thank you, Mary. Well, at least she's got a good head start, if nothing else.
Right.
All right, Wendy. Yeah. So we're going to be talking about resilience today, which is, I think, something we've all kind of been through and could use more of. So I'm excited to hear what you've got for us.
All right, let's get going. Let me share. There it is. And switch mode. All right. So this is I originally called it resiliency and brain health, but it's really resiliency and the brain, which makes me, I keep on singing in my head, Pinky and the Brain, if anybody knows that, Pinky and the Brain. And so this whole time as I've been working on this, it's been resiliency and the brain. And I'm not a counselor. I do know a lot about this topic. And I have had the privilege of being in rehab, in brain injury rehab, as to watch many people go through what is the worst event typically of their lives, at least up to that point, with massive car accidents and all kinds of things. So I've gotten to see a lot of people kind of how they navigate things. So you already know that we're funded through the ACL, and at the state level through the Traumatic Brain Injury State Partnership Program through the Department of Health. And you know that we have lots of resources on our website, and it's brand new. Our website has been updated. So if you've been in the past, please go now and see. It's kind of much more organized into categories, so you can go in, see who you are, and find the information that you need. And then also the information on our BrainLinks YouTube channel. You can find that via our website though as well. Michelle, this my speakers box, can you all see that on my screen? Well, I need to move that out of your way, or
I don't see it.
Okay, perfect. All right, so what we're going to talk about is what is resilience, why do we need it, what does it have to do with the brain? We'll bring that connection in, and then we'll talk about how to get it for different folks, children, teens, adults, ourselves. So resiliency is the ability to bounce back in the face of adversity, and it's really a process. It's not just like I'm resilient or I'm not. It's a process of negotiating and managing and adapting to significant sources of stress or trauma in our life. So it's not just this thing that happens immediately. I want to throw up some of these quotes because they help us to understand some of the kind of the issues that make up resiliency. So Maya Angelou, I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it. That is really a resilient sort of attitude is, yeah, this is probably going to change me, but I'm going to be better for it. I'm not going to be worse for it. Bo Taplin, she was unstoppable, not because she did not have failures or doubts, but because she continued on despite them. So we all fail. We all doubt ourselves or our abilities, or even life from time to time, but it's our ability to continue on despite them. Carl Jung, I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. It's this empowerment that, and it's self-efficacy. I can choose to be what I'm going to be. And then I just love this, nevertheless, she persisted, because we see it everywhere now. It's like, regardless of what's going on, just persist, just keep on going. And resilience is really tied into all of these things. It's not in the direction of those arrows. They go all over the place, but resilience is tied to, like we said, brain health, but it's also our mental health, our physical health, and it's also tied to longevity, believe it or not, how long we live our lives and how healthy we are in those lives. Hardship can be very valuable. We're all coming through some potential. You might have come through COVID well because you are resilient, or it probably put on a lot of stressors for a lot of people. But we can come through hardship with improved relationships, having grown, new possibilities for our lives, greater appreciation for our lives, a greater sense of personal strength and spiritual development. And there's really this belief, this understanding that we can't become resilient without going through hardship. So it really makes us. What resilience can do is it can, well, let's first start with this. There's this groundbreaking study. It was a seminal study, one of the initial studies that has been going on for decades, the Kauai study, where they looked at every single person who was born in Kauai in this 1 year, and then they followed them. And what they found was that the ones that endured hardship, which put them at greater risk for poor outcomes, 1/3 of them did as well or better than people who came from stable homes. And when they looked at the resilient kids, what they found was that they were active problem solvers. They made plans, they set goals, and they had a very determined mindset. This one that was like, this isn't going to ruin my life, like similar to some of those quotes that we just saw. So resilience in the brain. With stress, there will be change in your brain, and there will be more change in your brain as you become more resilient. So it's actually, the stress is going to impact you in your brain in one way. So it's interesting for me as a brain person to be thinking of stress and resilience from this angle of the brain, because it then becomes even more important to be resilient, because if you're staying in that place where you are of non-resiliency, you're really having an impact on your brain. And your resilience, your work toward that will actually change your brain in a very positive way, where stress will change it in a negative way. And this is neuroplasticity. That's the ability of your brain to change. So with stress, the prefrontal cortex right up front, and the amygdala, which is deeper in the brain, which is an emotional activation center, they're both activated with stress. How quickly the messages stop going between that prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, right? They're firing back and forth. The quicker those messages stop or slow down is how quickly you're going to recover from that stress. If we have greater resilience, we have more connections between those two areas and greater activity in that prefrontal cortex. The greater activity we have in the prefrontal cortex, the greater we can recover. So the quieter the amygdala, that emotional center, the better the prefrontal cortex can plan and act without negative emotions getting in the way. So you have this stressor, the prefrontal cortex heightens, the amygdala heightens, these messages go back and forth. The prefrontal cortex then calms that down, the amygdala gets quieter, and the prefrontal cortex can now plan your next steps. And you may have had situations where that you've been stressed, and I mean like, frightened sort of stress, and you can't think. You don't know. It could be also grief kind of stress, and you don't know what to do. You don't know what to go to do next. And it's not until that the amygdala, the emotional center, calms down that you can begin to know what to do. So resilience is a brain thing. So this might sound familiar to you if anybody's worked with children with ACEs. ACEs are the adverse childhood experiences, which that they are these experiences that if you have enough of them, they will begin to change your brain. And it's this stress on stress on stress. And it changes the microglia cells so that they produce neurochemicals that cause inflammation. And we talked about this in brain health. I just want to do a quick refresher. And children with a lot of ACEs are more likely to develop mood disorders and poor executive functioning, which is that frontal lobe, that prefrontal cortex function, decreased decision-making, also a prefrontal cortex. They have weaker connections between the prefrontal cortex and other key areas of the brain. So they have weaker connections between the PFC and the amygdala, so it can't quiet as well. So resiliency is really in the brain, the ability to calm the amygdala and turn on the prefrontal cortex. This to me is fascinating. Stress is what we perceive it to be. So one person's fun could be another person's terror. This is my mother-in-law, Betty, and she is standing on one of those glass platforms. I did this out in at the Bass Pro Shop out in Memphis at the pyramid out there. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's not nearly as high. I was terrified. I don't like it. I'm not afraid of heights, but I do not like to be on a glass platform up high. Just doesn't feel safe to me. I don't like it.
I'm with you.
Look at her.
I call myself an adrenaline reject.
Yeah, no, I don't love that either. I'm not real fond of roller coasters anymore. I don't want to do it. But I like other things. Yes, I felt like Paul, like I was going to drop through the glass. But she was thriving. She loved it. She was just having a grand old time. And there was a study that looked at high stress and risk of death. And they looked at 30,000 people, and they asked them how much stress they had over the last year and whether they perceive that stress to be a good thing or a bad thing. Flash forward 8 years, and they go back and they take a look, and they find that the people who had high levels of stress, it increased their risk of dying by 43%.
Wow.
But not in the people that perceived the stress to be positive. That is huge. We have to, in fact, the people who perceived the stress as positive actually even did better than the people who did not have a lot of stress over that last year. That is powerful. That means that it's our relationship to stress that determines so much. So we've got to get that relationship straight. Let me give you some more examples of that. Here's Betty back again. AIDS and optimism. They looked at people who had AIDS, and those who were optimistic lived longer than people who were realistic. And think about how many people will say to you, oh, but you're not being realistic. That's not likely to happen. Or you've really got to look at what this disease is bringing to you, or this situation. You've got to be realistic. No, don't be realistic. Be optimistic. The people who were optimistic, it actually increased their lifespan. Same with cancer and heart patients. Those that were optimistic about their situation lived longer, and they lived healthier with less chances of a recurrence. This is my mother-in-law, Betty. She is my model for resilience. I talked about her in a different situation in brain health. She had cancer, and her approach was, I only detected this through a routine checkup. I was not feeling sick. Therefore, I am not sick. And we were a little concerned at this point. Uh-oh, she's not going to do what she has to do. She did everything. She had surgery. She showed up for every appointment. She had chemo for the better part of a year, and came through it beautifully. After her surgery, we walked into her hospital room. She's sitting in a chair. She's got a drink in one hand, not alcoholic, and she had on neon yellow sunglasses, and she said, "I'm at the beach. I'm at the beach." And that was just her approach to this. She was going to transport herself someplace else. She knew perfectly well where she was. Then she said to me, I was a biker chick around that time for Halloween, and she said, "Do you still have your nose ring?" I said, "I'll find you a nose ring. Why do you want the nose ring?" And she said, "I want to put it in my belly button so that when she knew that the doctor was going to lift her shirt to check up her incision in about a week, and she wanted him to see the belly ring, and because she thought that would be hysterical." So this is the approach that we need to be taking. She's just the embodiment of it for me. Our ability to deal with stress actually impacts the length of our lives. The oldest old, and this is people who are it's definitely like 90s, could be just the ones over 100, they handle stress better than the average person. And they talk about it as, in the Okinawa program and in Blue Zones, they talk about it as shedding stress. It just rolls off of them like the water off a duck. And they handle stress better. They react less negatively and less hostilely. And they accept change as a part of life, even if it seems negative at first. Let me give you an example of that. When I first started working, I graduated from graduate school, and I knew I wanted to be in brain injury. I knew where I wanted to go, and I got a job there. And I was so excited. I stayed for 20 years. And shortly after I got there, they changed the whole team system. Well, everybody was up in arms. This was a place where people, they had been there for a while. There are people that I worked with that are still there, and I've been out for at least 10 years. And it's just this great place that everybody loves. And they were up in arms. They were like, "No, we don't want it. We don't want this change. We don't want it." I loved this place. I wanted to be there more than anything. So I was like, they could do anything, and I'm going to be happy. It's going to be okay. Flash forward 10 years, and they want to change the system again. Those same people are now upset that there's going to be a change. And that was just so powerful for me, happening fairly young in my life, to go, you just never know. You don't know if stress is going to be good or bad. So let's just assume it's going to be fine. Or at least we can wait and see before we make this judgment and we react physically to it. So let's talk about how
I like the quote about the only thing you can plan for is change.
Yeah.
People have told me that, throughout my life when going through some major transitions, and it's really true. I mean, if you plan for the change and you can embrace it and try to maintain a little bit of a flexibility, I think that's where your resilience comes in.
Yeah, here comes Tim the cat. Come on, Tim. If I push him, he gets upset with me. Yeah, it's going to happen. Just look back on our lives so far. Change happens. It's how are you going to deal with it?
That was your cat's way of testing your resiliency.
Right. See if I got mad or not. I did not get mad. I'm too used to him at this point. And this is when he does it. Yes.
I have a question. I see that about this slide about how do we build resilience, but are some people born with resilience, or do we have to build it?
That's a really good question. I don't know that I've seen anything that I've mostly seen we need to build it. I think that if you've got the right people around you who are always modeling a good approach to life, then I think you're building it as you go, so that at the time that you have that first stressor, maybe you're more ready for it. I think I had my first major stressor at 17. And I would have told you before that I was pretty resilient, that I could go with the flow and I could take change pretty well. Well, then something came that was too big. I had never encountered that in my young life before. So I think sometimes with that too, we, it's like we think we're doing well, and then we're hit with something that's really rough. But that's an interesting question. I've not heard it like that. I've always heard that it's something that you have to develop, but you can be in some really good circumstances meaning the people around you. You can have a terrible circumstance, but the people around you help you through it so well that you learn resilience through that. So I'm going to talk about how we build it in different groups. And the really good news about resilience is that, I'm going to use this metaphor as we go, that there are many doors that you can go through to become resilient. So if I tell you one thing and you don't like that, or you're like, that's not me, I could never do that, don't worry about it. Don't go in that door. Look for the other doors, because there's so many ways to become resilient. So looking at younger children, they really just need the support of one caring adult. They just need one. Someone that's in their corner. It could be anyone. It could be a parent, but if they don't have that, it can be a coach. It can be a teacher. It can be one of us. Social connections are incredibly important as well. We've got to know that we have people around us. And then what we can be doing is including their team of support. When we're talking with people and saying that, oh, that your case manager, I told her what you did, and she was just thrilled to hear about that. I told Grandma, and she's so proud of you. It's bringing in, letting people know they're not alone. There are other people out there thinking about you and supporting you. We need to be able to teach children to ask for help. And I have this broken down into children, teens, and adults, but really there's so much overlap. So if you see something here that you're like, oh, adults can do that too, yes. So we have to be able to ask for help, and we can ask questions like, who's asked for help with this, to set that tone that that's okay. We support each other through our fearful things, meaning that we can keep on going despite our fear, that we don't have to let the fear stop us. And exercise, we're going to talk about again. It strengthens the brain. It increases neurochemicals and the neurochemicals that calm stress. We need to build executive functions. If you remember the Kauai kids, they talked about things like they were problem solvers, they were planners. That's all frontal lobe. That's all executive functioning up front. So we can establish routines. That helps children to have structure and to just to know. It kind of helps us to create templates in our head and put some system around the world. We can build those problem-solving skills using all kinds of strategies, pros and cons, what's works before. List every idea you have, even the silly ones, break it down into steps. Play is so important for kids, especially creative play, not necessarily video games per se, but creative play, board games, memory games. So important. We need to let them have some independence and some ability to disagree, and some ability to make their own decisions. We can't be jumping in all of the time to solve things for them. We talked about in brain health how meditation is so impactful on the brain as well. It can literally change your brain in a really, really positive way. It builds more gray matter volume. And it quiets that DMN, that default mode network, which is that chatter. It's kind of ties into anxiety. It's that constant voice. Some people call it the monkey mind that won't be quiet. And it quiets that down. It's not quieting thinking. It's just quieting that clutter. It increases the hippocampus, which is memory and new learning, and it quiets that amygdala. so that we can, doesn't mean we don't have emotions. It just means that they're not getting in our way. We can quiet that and just be able to think. And meditation is effective for so much. This is a beginning list: depression, pain, anxiety, attention disorder, addiction, so much. Different ways to meditate. I won't spend too much time on this because we did cover this in brain health, but so you can look at quieting the mind, just sitting still. That's hard for a lot of people, but you can do a mantra. So the mind has something to do, so the monkey mind's not going. You can have a guided meditation or progressive relaxation, which you can find those on YouTube. There's plenty of them. Mindfulness, you can go walking and not have your mind going, but paying attention to what does each step feel like? What does my body feel like in my clothes? Really being mindful of the walk itself. There are special YouTube meditations for children and teens. All you have to do is Google it. You can find the age range that you're looking for, and there are also ones that can be brought into schools and programs, so you can do it with groups. I shared the pufferfish last time because he's just so good at helping you to deep breathe, breathing in and breathing out. And I just love him because he's a good model for children, adults as well, but he's great for kids to kind of get that sense of, it's a real visual for deep breathing. Because you can't, let me quiet him down. When we're deep breathing, it changes, we have a physiological response to that, and it is very hard for us to be stressed when we're deep breathing. I don't mean that it just takes it away in an instant, but it does change things. So if you continue to do deep breathing, you will watch things like blood pressure and heart rate, they'll all come down. There's a physiological response. We can build
I was just going to add, Wendy, I really like the visuals for deep breathing, because I find, for myself at least, when deep breathing, I don't always take, how you're supposed to take a longer breath and exhale for a longer period of time. And I feel like that visual really helps, because I use the one on my Apple Watch, really helps with how long the exhale is really supposed to be. Otherwise, you can tend to shorten it if you try to do it without kind of that prompt. And I think that's really helpful just in getting effective breathing, to have that visual added to it.
Yes. Yes. And there are lots of other ways that you can play with breathing, like the box breathing, where it's breathing in for 4 seconds and hold for 4 seconds, and then out for 4, and then hold that for 4. And so all kinds of things that you can do. Just find what works, what you like the best.
Yeah, and 4 seconds is a really long time if you do it right. So that's why the visual helps me of the...
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So also building feelings of competency. We need to have a sense that that we can do this. We're good at this. So it's that sense of, do you feel like the apocalypse is loading? Like it's, oh my gosh, it's coming. Or do you feel like you have the ability to just cancel it, that you are in control? You can have some control over this. We need to have optimism. What's good about this situation? There could be something there. Let's focus on that. Let's see that. We need to teach kids to reframe it. So you can do things like, oh, you can turn this around. You can learn from this and do better the next time. A real reframe for me that I love, I will look for these things. I long for reframes in some situations. And this is really where there is such a different way of seeing it that it changes everything. I can't remember all the details right now, but the first real one that I remember about this, a friend of mine, I was blessed to have counselors and neuropsychologists around me in my work. And there was a situation where someone really hurt me, and I was upset, I was angry, and it was off the charts. And this psychologist, she reframed it by telling me the perspective of the other person. That changed everything. It immediately I lost my emotion. And if anything, I had empathy. So it's that reframe. If you can see something else that's happening, that can be the most powerful. Some of these, they're fine, but you might get me mad too if you said it. You can learn from this, Ben, do better next time. You know, the way it came across might actually set me off. I might not listen to that.
Yeah, I was going to say that too. I think you made a good point though. I mean, I think the primary thing with reframing something is really understanding the root cause of what happened, and kind of that seek to understand mode instead of just making an assumption, which kind of fuels potentially the negative emotions. But yeah, I think that's an excellent example of just really seeking to understand and thinking about it from someone else's perspective, that empathy piece. And then it definitely can reframe how you feel about the situation.
Yeah, and another type of reframe would be.
I'm
Go ahead,
sorry
Sean.
if I interrupted. Just sometimes reframing can make you feel worse too. It did for me sometimes.
I'm sorry, can make you feel bad?
Yeah, learning about what the other person was feeling, but to me it made me feel bad. I remember an experience like that.
Sure. It absolutely can. So I would say, like, so go with it. If it helps you, go there. If you need to move away from that, then go there. And you might be able to come back and kind of handle that other emotion at another time. It's all about, I think, understanding where am I right now and checking in often. I think sometimes people get to an extreme place in the emotion, get into a depression. I think it can be helpful to be checking in as you go, to go, okay, I'm going in a bad place. I need to put my attention somewhere else. Another reframe might happen when, let's say, you're right in a situation, or you're maybe 3 years after a situation and you're still angry and you're looking at all the bad that it did for your life, and someone can turn it around, or we can do this too for ourselves and go, oh my gosh, but without that, this would never have happened. And then it becomes a choice. What do I want to look at? Do I want to focus on all the bad that it brought me, or do I want to shift my focus and look at the good that it brought me?
Right.
And it's our choice. We have that choice where to go. We talked about not running into.
I think another important component in that too is just gratitude and kind of like, with the optimism piece, thinking about, what is going well, or, what good did come from that, or what did I learn from that, and how has that impacted me in a positive way?
Right. Optimism, hope, all so important. We need to, when we're working with someone, meet them where they are. So we can't just say, oh, get over it, right? We want them to be further down that path, but we need to meet them where they are. And sometimes there's a time I don't care how resilient you are and how resilient you want to be, there's a time to be sad. There's a time to be angry, and to honor those feelings, move them through so you can move on to a better place after that. So we have to meet people
and
where
avoid
they are.
Triggers like calm down.
Right.
That doesn't work well for me and many others that I'm aware of.
Yeah. Now what would work with me is, let's take some deep breaths. Take a deep breath with me. That now I feel like you're with me and you've given me a way to calm down and not just telling me to calm down. Having a role model or a hero can be helpful. That can be a real person, or it doesn't have to be. If we're striving to be like this person who does good, or that can be helpful as well. Relationships, got to help to build relationships around the child. Let them talk and let them know that they're loved unconditionally. It's not what happened. I don't like what happened, or I don't like the behavior, but I love you. We've got to, this is we have to model it. If we're in children's lives, we have to model resiliency. We can't tell them to be optimistic and then we are negative. We have to have healthy relationships around us and promote faith if that's appropriate in that situation. Faith doesn't have to be, faith can be in lots of different ways. Hope, optimism, and strength in adversity. So we've got to be that role model, or they're not going to listen to us. This is just a nice kind of handout thing to teach. It's 10 best phrases to teach resilience to kids.
Can I pause you one more time, Wendy?
Sure,
I think it's really important on that last slide, where you're talking about that you have to model these things and promote that on your end. But I think it's really important too, as the person who's kind of in that role for someone else, you have to make sure you have that for yourself too. Because
exactly.
you can't be resilient and not ask for help when you need to and have good support for yourself. So, I mean, that's kind of what leads to burnout is you're always doing it to show the other person what is right, but you also have to have that outlet for yourself. So I think that's really important from a caregiver perspective, is to make sure that you also have supportive relationships and have the ability to talk things through with someone.
Yep. Yes. And it doesn't mean that we always have to be in that good spot. It can be really helpful for kids to say, listen, I am so sad right now, but I know I'm going to get through this. I'm just going to be sad right now. I'm not going to be sad forever, and I'm going to move through this. And then it's being honest with them and showing them that emotions are real and it's okay to be them for at least for a time. This goes back to our other conversation where I think some of these are good and some of these you probably better not say to me because I might get mad. But I think things like number 4, who have you spoken to about this? That's getting that help. Sometimes we need to break away from something for a little bit. So number 3, let's take a break. But again, if you said to me, come on, laugh it off, depending on the situation, I might get upset. But if that is part of, we've had bigger discussions about these things and it's part of something that we say, and I understand the larger perspective of where you're coming from, then it might be okay. So we do have to take that into consideration. Okay, so for teens, many, many doors for them as well. Sometimes having a refuge, a place to escape that's quiet, where they can be away from the stress for a while. Let's think of like parents who are always arguing, being able to get into their room or to go to school. Having a refuge, it can help us to have a place where we can become resilient. Having a way to express themselves, this could be in lots of different ways. It could be through writing, art, guitar, but having a way that I can express my emotions, my thoughts. And then with teens, continue to model, even if they don't appear to be paying attention, because they are listening, and they can choose to continue to kind of take that on over time. So this is, I found this, it's all good in the end. If it's not good, it's not the end. I found this, my kids were extremely young, and I hung it was a greeting card, kind of like the blank inside, and I hung it on their mirror in the bathroom, and it stayed there for years. When we moved houses, it moved with us. They wanted it there. And then, but I would have told you really that they didn't think much of it, except that it had to go up in the new house. When my daughter went through a very painful time in her late teens, when she came through that, she said to me, I knew, I just kept remembering that card. That it wasn't good, so it wasn't the end. And children, teens, they have not necessarily been through something to get to the other side, to know that we always do get to the other side of something, even if it's just feeling better about a situation that changed our lives. We will get through where we are right now if we just stick with it, we stay with it. So I put that up because I knew that there were times that they weren't going to talk to me. If they were anything like me, they weren't going to talk to their parents about everything either. So continue to model, continue to have positivity around them. That sense of mastery, that locus of control, I can do this, is also important for teens. Reframing, having something that they can latch onto, like volunteer work, where they can develop empathy, or a job, responsibility. And then we also need to help them to develop autonomy, self-reliance. I can do this. Relationships that comes up everywhere. Being able to take charge of their own lives, take a step. Humor and optimism. Morality, doing the right thing. This was something that my husband would say to our kids. He just did when throughout their whole lives, he started very young. He would say, well, we need to do the right thing. And then he would help them through to figure out what the right thing was. As they got older, sometimes he would just say to them, do the right thing. Because he knew they knew, but they wanted to do the other thing. And when they would come to us, he would just say, do the right thing. And that has stuck through them, through their lives into adulthood. We have to build an awareness of stressors, what stresses me, so I have an understanding of that. And then we have to, it's helpful to have, again, I said, many doors. You don't have to have a passion. A passion is helpful. And a passion in life doesn't have to be for life. So when I was a teenager, I had many passions that have nothing to do with my life now. But having that sport that they can go to, that's why COVID was so difficult, because it took away the passion for a lot of kids, the going to school or the interaction with the teachers and the sports. But so having a passion, maybe helping them to find a different one during that time.
Yeah, I think that you're touching on things like having a purpose, being engaged, having relationships. It all kind of goes back to the positive psychology approach and PERMA. But I mean, those things are all important for all of us, and especially with building resilience. So I think it's nice to point all of those out.
And underneath it, it's also important because it's important for our brain. All of these positive things are positively changing our brain and making it harder for us to go into a depression. It literally becomes harder because we have all these neurochemicals that are firing in a very positive way, which means if you're in a depression right now, that's fine. You can get out of it, and it takes more focus on some of these things. So if you're in a depression right now, focus on anything you see here: self-care, relaxation, try new things, break out of that, set reasonable goals, don't overwhelm yourself, take breaks, have a consistent routine, be accepting of the change. A few things for adults. So in general, anything that helps your brain is going to help you to be more resilient as well, because your brain is now set up to do positive things for you. Music is incredible, helps with relaxation and recovery from a situation. It also helps our brain health. If you, go ahead, Sean, did you have a thought?
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I missed a couple of slides. Can you go back some?
This one?
The one after that.
This one?
No, the one after, no, that one. So anything.
That one.
So
anything that helps your brain. Now I'm going to talk about what some of these things are. And if you haven't listened to the one that I did on brain health, go back and listen to that. There's actually 2 parts. Go back and listen to that because that will give you all kinds of things that can help your brain. In fact, some of the things coming up, we're just going to skim over because they're in that one. But anything that helps your brain is going to be, and we'll talk about what some of those, so music is one of those things.
And Sean, just so you know, I put the link for the CCN website in the chat box, so you can find a lot of the former BrainLinks presentations under the special edition dropdown.
Okay.
So we actually see there's a lot of research with people who have Alzheimer's and music, and it is so cool. If you just Google music and Alzheimer's, you will see some incredible videos of people who they're not speaking, and they are really not moving. They're just sitting in a chair, and then they put on music that is important to them in their lives, and you will see them begin to speak, begin to dance in their chair, sometimes get up and dance if they can, and sometimes conversation. You'll be able to have a conversation with that person because it's activating the brain in a positive way. It can do the same thing for us. Just listening to music or listening and singing will activate, that'll bring in a different part of the brain. Listening, singing, dancing, any combination, they're going to be pulling in different parts of your brain, which is real important and healthy. We talked about healthy foods for the brain in the brain health. What I'll just say that for our overall health, a whole food plant-based diet, I'm saying formerly known as vegan, that's what vegan is as well, except vegan can also be garbage food. So the emphasis now is on whole food plant-based, so not French fries. And it's fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, which is peas, beans, and lentils. But here, what I'll talk about here is that healthy food, eating more,
picture
eating
of a head with a brain, and instead of a brain, it's like kale and yes, right.
sorry, I didn't catch all of that.
And I don't mean
but
like
yeah,
French
so
fries. You can be
Philip,
you can be vegan.
we can hear you, Philip.
I got him. Go ahead, Wendy.
Okay. I wasn't sure if he was asking a question or, so healthy foods, increasing the fruits and vegetables will also help behavior. So if you're dealing with someone who has poor behavior, that can also be, this isn't poor behavior, but also mood. Increasing fruits and vegetables will increase your mood. And I'm not saying necessarily this meal, now you see the outcome, but over time, it will also help to decrease bad behavior like aggression, and it will also increase attention. So the food that we eat is so, so important. I want to talk about faith.
I'm sorry again, Wendy, but on the previous slide on food, how much time did it take for the reduction? Do you know?
Before you would see a change?
Yeah, if you.
I don't recall in the studies, but if you want to, if you email me, I can look them up. I have them here somewhere, and I can send that to you. The thing is to always to keep on that lifelong. So it's not just, let's wait and see the behavior change and then we're good to go. You want to stay on that always. But sorry, I don't know that off the top of my head.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and it's been linked. It improves behavior in sometimes you'll see in children with autism and children with attention deficit as well as one of these studies was on teens. But it also helps. There's lots of research about it helping with mood in any age. Faith, I thought this was really interesting. This doesn't mean you have to go to church, although what's interesting to me is a lot of the things we've already talked about are kind of handled in faith. So prayer and meditation is that quiet, that stilling of the mind. Prayer is also, I talked about locus of control, knowing that I can control something. One of the first things that I do when I have a situation where there's nothing I can do, I am out of control, is recently that mother-in-law that I talked about had a terrible situation. I couldn't do a thing. She's in another state. My husband went. I couldn't do a thing, and I prayed, and that gave me comfort. It was like I can't do anything else, but I can do that. And it wasn't even like it was just that's what happened. It's just what I did without thinking about it. Meditation, quieting the mind, we talked about. Giving and serving is often a part of faith. That is really important for us in terms of feeling like that we can help. We do have control over things. It builds empathy. It gets us acting and doing things. Sabbath is really interesting. Even if you're not religious or spiritual, take a Sabbath from electronics in your house. So that concept of dropping out of society and having that, just that quiet, that break from everything is really great. Faith often brings in a community, and then concepts, so life perspective, like a lot of people will find comfort in the biblical thought of things happen for a reason. So it's, right, if I think, okay, this terrible thing that just happened, it happened for a reason, it's allowing me to drop out of my emotion and just wait and see. Maybe I can see what the reason is. Exercise is so important. I talk about this more in brain health, but so important for mental health. I also talk about sleep there, where sleep helps to clear your brain of toxins and plaques. So we've got to be sleeping very well at night. And this is interesting that the lack of sleep, it impacts our emotional control and our ability to think a few steps ahead. Both of those things are the emotional control part by the prefrontal cortex. And sleep increases our amygdala, not in a heightening sort of way, but in a strengthening way, in that it increases our ability to control our emotional reaction. I probably have that worded wrong. 2 nights of no sleep increases symptoms of depression, paranoia, and anxiety. We've got to sleep. And then these are some strategies. Again, I talk about them in brain health. The ants at the bottom is your automatic negative thoughts. We've got to look at those honestly and change them, and then fix what keeps us up at night. Positive self-talk, the brain releases similar chemicals during negative self-talk as it does during depression. So we can talk ourselves potentially into depression because it's the same neurochemicals. So we've got to be positive and tell ourselves positive thoughts because they have biochemical counterparts, every thought. And they come from our brain, and they're collections of neurotransmitters and nerve cell connections that can be triggered by the electrical stimulation of the brain. That's how we know that. Just a couple things on stress. I love this. It is what it is. If we can understand this, that thing that happened out in the world does not have to be stressful. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It just is. It is what it is. It doesn't have to be negative or positive. It just is. This thing happened. Let's take our emotions out of it to some degree and just deal with it. That's handling stress. That's shedding stress. That's what the oldest old do. And then I gave you the Dalai Lama last time that if there's something we can do about it, go do it. If there's something that and so then don't worry. If we can't do anything about it, don't worry about it, right? So there's never a need to worry. Worry just gets in our way. Because our focus is traumatic brain injury, what's interesting to me is that people who have a traumatic brain injury can still be resilient. And I watched this, and being resilient beforehand helps that. Interestingly, their cognitive flexibility didn't predict their resiliency. Things that did influence it were like minority status. It was harder to be resilient. Substance abuse before the injury, higher anxiety, higher disability status, greater life satisfaction. All these things influenced it. And we are just about done. So this, I think, fits with the work that you do too. So in the recommendation in rehab is that, let's talk about people's resiliency. Let's check into it. Let's do some of the questionnaires and figure out where they are so we can figure out where do they need to get to and how can we help them and how do we plan that into our goals with people. This is a reminder about our brain health document that's up on our website, this tndisability.org/brain. And that is it. Please, I put the very first thing in the chat should be our survey. You can also read the QR code here. Take a minute to fill that out if you don't mind, that'll help us. And you just have to enter today's date, August 3rd, resiliency and brain health, and Wendy. Get any of those things in there and it'll be helpful. So I thank you. I know I ran right up to the end. I'm so sorry. But
You're totally fine.
Some questions throughout.
Yeah, we didn't have any additional questions other than some comments about that it was an excellent presentation. I did repost the survey link in the chat box, so you don't have to search for it.
Thank you.
But yeah, great presentation, great timing on the presentation. I know, stresses are starting to get high again for some, related to things going on in the world. So it's always good to be reminded of what can not only help us deal with that kind of stress and build our resiliency, but also to help our brain to do that. So I think it's really important just thinking through all of the, what's good for your physical health is good for your brain health, which ends up being good for your mental health, and it's all related. So really appreciate you, Wendy, coming on again and educating us on the brain perspective of resiliency. And we definitely hope we have more opportunities to have you all on in the future. But
Great. Thank you.
thank you, everybody, for joining Clinical Consultation Network today. We do it every Tuesday at 12:30 Central Time via WebEx. So we will see you all next week for another presentation. Have a good one.
Thank you, everybody.